Hello and welcome to Cornell Cooperative Extension of Ulster County's Coop-Cast. I'm Samantha Ambrosini, your Season 3 host. I'm joined by a very interesting guest today, here to talk to us about several different things, so why don't we jump right in? Can you please introduce yourself for us?
Sure. My name is Tim Dressel. I'm currently the president of the board of directors for the CCE Ulster. I'm also the president and founder of Kettleborough Cider House in New Paltz, and I don't really know what my title is, but family member / manager / operator of Dressel Farms, also in New Paltz.
So I guess my first questions are going to be about the CCE stuff.
Okay.
So how did you come to be president of the board?
That's a good question. I got recruited to be on the board to begin with. I knew some of the people that are involved in CCE already. My family and our business has been closely working with Cornell, the lab, and CCE for quite a while. So I guess my name was floating around, and when it came time to fill a board position, they decided that I might be a good candidate. Then I guess I made the mistake of opening my mouth too much while in board meetings and decided that when the outgoing president's term was up, they unanimously put me in that position. So I was grateful to have that opportunity. I'm not sure I deserve it, but here I am.
Well, I'm sure that's not true. There's definitely a reason they elected you then. My next question, what have you learned from your tenure on the board?
Well, to begin with, just the scope of what Extension does and all the projects and outreaches and things that go on there, I really had no firm grasp of just exactly what Cornell Cooperative Extension was, or what we were doing as a group. So I knew the agricultural side of it, working with CCE and the lab on that side. And I knew about 4-H in that program, but I really didn't know about all of the other things like the watershed program, local outreach programs, after school activities, things like that. So the biggest thing that I learned, I guess, is just how much CCE does locally, but also the people and stuff involved in it really gave me a good understanding more of the local communities and how we influence those. So
would you say that like you learn more just being on the board in general, or as president specifically?
The board in general, for sure. Being a president, you get a little bit more of a look behind the curtain, I guess. Not that board members aren't involved in things like that, but there's a lot more matters that I need to attend to personally now that I'm president. Things that regular non-presidential board members, I guess, don't necessarily have to deal with. But being a board member, I guess I learned more as a general board member than I did when I became president.
So as president, you like get more of the details rather than the overview, would you say?
Yeah, the workings behind the board more than anything else. So involvement with matters that get brought to the board eventually, but discussing things with Jared, the administrators, and the other things that the board has to deal with overall. I guess I see the underworkings more, rather than when Jared and I bring something to the board and say this is what's being done or this is what's been happening. As a board member, you get kind of the crib notes, the brief synopsis, whereas now that I'm president, I'm on some of these calls that are going to influence where the board and eventually the organization goes as a whole.
Well, that's actually my next question is, where do you see CCE going in the future? Do you have any like specific hopes for the organization or a general direction you want to see it go?
I think that, especially with the new federal administration that we have now, we're going to see a lot more push towards regulating and mitigating the climate change and global warming crisis. And while I hope, yes.
Thank God.
Yes. So while, federally there can be more, broader scope laws that might influence corporations or sales and things like that. I think that it's going to come down to local organizations like CCE to have the local outreach and the more grassroots job of influencing how people live their everyday lives. Things like just kind of making sure that on a personal level, citizens have a means and a way and a direction to hopefully influence the global climate change crisis, rather than, the president can make laws that say, well, this, you have to have this carbon tax or whatever, but organizations like CCE can instruct and educate and help guide local communities to be more active and have a more, like I said, grassroots or personal change to make that global warming mitigation.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a great answer. I would love to see that happen. But then moving on from your position on CCE to Dressel Farms and Apples, do you think you could give just a brief history or overview of the farm?
Sure. I am the fourth generation of Dressel to farm here in New Paltz. My great-grandfather was hired on the farm by its previous owner back in 1923, so we're going on about 100 years right now. And he was the foreman of the farm for about 30 years until the previous owner and his wife passed away, and then he purchased the farm from their estate, renamed it Dressel Farms in the mid-50s, and along with my grandfather, bought more land, expanded, and kind of shaped the farm to how it is today. So now my grandfather, who's 85, I believe, is still involved on the farm. So it's being run by three generations of us right now: my grandfather, my father, and I, along with my sister, who has a very big share in it, my wife, and my mother also. So we're now farming approximately 400 acres, mostly apples. And most of those apples go to grocery stores up and down the East Coast.
Wow.
We do a little bit of retail. That includes our farm stand. We do some pick your own, smaller things like that. But yes, a vast majority of the farm's business is wholesale agriculture to grocery stores, food banks, things like that.
That's really interesting. I love apple picking. Is like one of my favorite things to do.
We should come strawberry picking next month.
I love strawberries so much. I might have to do that. So what challenges do you say like you have to face the most with your farm, and like how do you adapt to changes and everything? Like I'm sure that the pandemic has affected you guys too. So how do you deal with that?
So I'll address the pandemic first, I guess. The thing with the pandemic was we really never stopped doing what we're doing. It set in last March, and springtime is one of the most critical times of the year for us. It's when, the trees start growing again. It's when we really have to kind of shift from dormant season to going back outside and managing and caring for the farm. And I was saying this last year, but the trees didn't know we had a global pandemic going on. They didn't care. Things were the same as they've always been. And right off the bat, we were designated as essential workers and really just went on with our day-to-day, just made sure we were being safe about it. All of our employees were wearing masks even outside, things like that. And it actually was a little bit of a boon for us at the beginning, because if you remember, grocery store shelves were empty all of a sudden. Yeah. And like I said, grocery stores are our biggest business as far as our sales go. So when people made a run on grocery stores, apples were part of that. And we normally in March, April, we're packing our fruit almost year round. We pick enough that we do a lot of long-term storage, and we're packing, the fall's fruit the next spring even. And people aren't really thinking about apples in March. So sales slow down. You have a little bit of a lull, and you kind of work through what you have left. But last March, our distributor called us up and said, we need every single apple you can give us as fast as you can give it to us, because grocery stores are scrambling right now just to get stuff back on their shelves. So it actually worked out kind of well for us last March. We moved some apples that wouldn't have moved as quickly. But yeah, we had to adjust our retail and our pick your own operations. Obviously, we normally have nice open shelves where people can, browse the produce and whatever. And we put that on hold, and everything was served with gloves and masks and everything, and really tried to limit, especially in the beginning. For the first time in 30 years, we didn't have pick your own strawberries last year, which was upsetting, but also kind of a good thing, because we also saw a big rise in our retail. And there's a couple theories of why that is. A lot of it was people that are normally weekenders from the city that come up and spend a couple days and then go back. They moved out of the city and they stayed here. So we had a lot of the normal people that aren't here during the weekdays here 24/7. So we saw a lot of those people that were coming in and buying fresh fruit because we were safer than the grocery store. But yeah, we drastically changed how we organized customers with pick your own apples in the fall. We did drive-through payments. We charged by the car for the first time. It was a much different system than we normally do. So a lot of changes as far as the pandemic goes, just keeping people, employees, and customers safe. Other issues that we deal with, challenges, not pandemic related. Any farmer will tell you there's a lot of risk involved with farming that you have little to no control over. Clearly one being the weather, yeah. Which ties back into my previous stuff about CCE and climate change and wanting to mitigate that. We've seen a lot more severe or extreme weather patterns lately, even just in the time I've been back from college, where a big thing that we're worried about right now in April and May is spring frost. When the apple trees have started to bud, you're seeing all these flowers out, and it's very possible that we get a cold night where the temperatures dip down below freezing. You see frost happen. And if that does happen, you can lose an entire crop overnight. And while that was always a threat in the past, it was never something that we worried about constantly. And last spring, we had one of the worst frost event springs we've ever had. We had 9 nights where we were worried about frost, where we were running our frost protection machine. We have wind machines that try and stir the air and keep frost from settling on the apple buds. And normally I've seen years where we have never had to run those. Usually it's once or twice. In a bad year, it'd be 4 or 5 times. Last year we did it 9 times.
And in a row too, right? Like 9 times in a row.
Yeah. It was a lot of. We ended up with less than half of a crop last year because of that. Also last year, I think it was last year, that big hailstorm that came through.
I do remember that. Yeah,
that was in July, and we saw hail the size of quarters or closer to golf balls. And my grandfather, who's 85 and been doing this his whole life, said it was the craziest hailstorm he's ever seen. So these big swings in temperature, the big thing that happened last year that made the spring even worse was we had 70 degrees for close to a week in February. That starts the trees metabolizing and wakes them up, if you want to say it that way, early. Mm-hmm. And then you have a wider window where you're worried about frost, because instead of the buds coming out late March, early April, they were coming out early March, late February even. And so then you're worried about frost for 4 months instead of 2. So it's all these things put together. These extreme weather patterns are getting worse, and it's concerning. And beyond that, there's other legal things that have changed, labor laws, things like that. But all those things are, we have a little bit more control over sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, like I knew global warming is obviously getting so bad, but I never thought it would be that much of a difference so quickly. That's like crazy.
Yeah. I remember as a kid, my father going out, in the middle of the night in the spring, and him being tired and stuff. And spring was always a hard time, has always been a hard time, but just seems like lately, these, instead of hail every 15 years, it's we're worried about hail every year. We're almost seeing at least some sort of hailstorm. And yeah, the spring frosts are always a threat, but like I said, those weeks of 70 degrees in February, people post on Facebook, oh, it's so nice out, I'm going outside in my shorts. I'm like, no, this is really bad. So
Yeah.
while it's nice in some respects that you don't have to shovel your car off in February, the ramifications as far as agriculture goes, we're going to see a big change in what we can grow here and how well we can do it.
Yeah. Oh, that definitely makes total sense. Like, that's honestly crazy. Like, I'm reeling from that. I never expected there would have been that much big of a change.
I grow some grapes too, and the grape growers around here joke that soon we'll be able to grow Zinfandel like California.
Yeah. Hopefully we don't get there.
No, but... we don't need Zinfandel. We can deal without that.
Yeah, we can buy that at the supermarket. Like, that's fine.
Exactly.
So what is it like working with your family there, like running a family business, and especially like such a big one, I feel, because you have so much land and you're selling to all these retailers across the East Coast?
I think it's just the same as any family business, which is it's a very double-edged sword. Most of the time it's great, but when it sucks a lot, because if you get in a fight with your boss at work, you can come home and complain to your wife and have a beer and go to bed, and the next day you just go back to work. If I have a fight with my boss at work, I had a fight with my dad, and that means that the next time we hang, or you got to kind of put it aside and everything, but it's that weird dynamic where you get the leeway that you do because they're your family, and you help each other and support each other more than just any other coworker might. But at the same time, you're still running a business and you still have expectations of each other. And if you fail to meet those expectations, it creates rifts, not just in your work environment, but also in your family environment. So it's all these challenges. But sometimes I wish it wasn't that way, but most of the time I'm happy that I get to see my parents every day. And, when I take my kids out to work, they get to hang out with their grandparents, and it's great when it's great, and it's not when it's not.
I mean, I'm sure it at least has helped you like develop pretty good communication skills.
Sometimes it can be hard because
yeah.
If you have an employee that's slacking off, you can tell them. If your sister isn't pulling her weight that day, or you're not, it's a little bit hard to be like, hey, you need to shape up or you're fired, because you can't fire your sister.
Yeah, that's true.
Or she can't fire me, I guess. I don't know which one of us has superiority at this point.
So Tara said your wife makes really good ice cream. Could you tell me about that a little bit?
Yeah. So we used to have a soft serve ice cream stand that my mother started kind of as her own little side project, so she could have her thing, and it went well. She did well with it. Eventually, after all of her kids graduated high school, and it became less fun eventually, I guess.
Oh.
So we stopped doing the soft serve, and it was more work than it was worth eventually. But we wanted to still have ice cream, and we had always kind of wanted to make our own ice cream. Soft serve is not really a make your own soft serve sort of thing. It's you get a machine, you stick it in, and you pull out. But so when my wife and I came back to the farm, and she's not from a farming family, and really didn't have a place to be on the farm where she felt that she was contributing very much. So when we got rid of the soft serve, we discussed and settled on doing this hard ice cream where we were making our own flavors and had our own kind of brands and things like that. And so my mother helps, but now my wife has kind of taken the reins of our hard ice cream operation. So she's making all of her own recipes, figuring out all of this, and she makes very small batch. It's about 2-gallon batches at a time. So very small batches, but inserting all of our own flavors. So anytime we can use our own fruit, we do, obviously. So we have raspberry ice cream made out of our own raspberries, and strawberry ice cream made out of our own strawberries. But she doesn't stop at that. She does her own cookies and cream, and then she tries to find seasonal flavors. So she does like she did a Girl Scout Thin Mint cookie thing.
I love that.
Or the mint cookie with mint ice cream for St. Patrick's Day. And around Christmas, she did like a Christmas sugar cookie one where she baked her own sugar cookies, crumbled them up, and put them in ice cream. And
that's awesome.
Our big one that we got semi-famous for was when we decided to do a apple cider donut ice cream, where she took if we had day-old donuts, which frequently happens in the fall, she would crumble them up, toast them under the broiler again so they got nice and crunchy, and then made a cinnamon ice cream and then put the apple cider donuts in it. So she was making what's six times size batches of those because we couldn't keep it on the shelves because people were freaking out so much over it. So it's been fun with that, and actually we're going to try to incorporate more of a single scoop sort of thing back into the hard cider room this year. So we're talking about doing not only hard cider flights but ice cream flights next to it.
Oh, that's awesome.
You can get a flight of our homemade ice creams and eat them with your cider.
Okay, like 2 things that need to happen. I'm gonna have to go try an ice cream and cider flight. That sounds awesome. 2, you gotta put aside a pint of that apple cider donut ice cream for me for when I come, because I love apple cider donuts so much. They're my favorite part of fall, honestly.
It's so funny. Good. So when we started making apple cider donuts, it's the same thing happened with me and the soft serve when we started doing ice cream. We only started doing cider donuts, I think, in the late 90s, even early 2000s. So I was, halfway through high school or more, and people kept coming to the stand and like, where's your donuts? Where's your donuts? We're like, we don't make donuts. Like it became a thing, and all of a sudden, shoot, we got to make donuts. So we started making donuts, and we bought I don't know, have you ever seen the robots that drop the donut?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we bought one of those, and within a year of starting making donuts, we had to buy a second larger one because it's insane. Like people lose their minds over
people go
donuts.
Crazy over them.
So yeah, and I mean, everyone has them, and everyone has their own way of making them. So you can go right down the road, and it's one of those things that we might not have. It'd be really hard to go from our stand to another farm stand down the road and like taste the difference in apples, because a Honeycrisp is a Honeycrisp, and like I might have more of them or bigger ones, but they're going to taste the same. But cider donuts, you can change how hot your grease is. You can change how long the donuts are in the grease. You can change how much flour you put in the dough. Like you can change so much about it that like people do cider donut tours. And we've had people like come around and be like, we're doing a cider donut tour today. Like they do a wine tour, and they go to every farm stand and they try every single donut, and then they rank them. And it's intense.
I'm like in awe over here. How did I not know about all these things happening?
I'm giving you
I need to like
great
take
idea
notes
for a weekend in the fall right now.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah,
exactly.
We had there's a apple cider donut run or something like that, where we had no idea about it. It just happened one day. Some guy showed up. He's like, I need a box of donuts. There was like a half marathon or a marathon going on where these guys were running farm to farm, and you had to eat a cider donut at every farm. And then like the winner got to the end. But then any place that also had hard cider, if you chugged a glass of hard cider, they knocked 5 minutes off your end time. So there's people coming through, pounding a cider donut, drinking a glass of cider, and then running another mile down the road to the next farm.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah.
Well, you like be falling on the floor by the time you're done.
It gets intense.
Wow, that's something I will not be doing.
Yeah, no, I don't want to partake in that, but yeah, the cider donut tour is a real thing. And
that sounds awesome.
Yeah, we usually rank top 2. I'm not going to say who the number 1
I want to know.
2, but we're neck and neck with another farm around here, and there's usually a distinction. We're usually number 1 or 2. People flip us back and forth.
So what would you say that you're best known for locally? Would it be your apples, your strawberries?
The strawberries are definitely the thing that set us apart. There's, like you said, quite a few apple farms around the area. We're one of the bigger ones in New Paltz, if not the biggest land-wise, I think. but not necessarily as far as pick your own or retail goes. But Dressel strawberries are a thing in New Paltz. So I'm already turning people away right now who are pulling in, where are the strawberries? They're an inch tall right now, that you got another month and a half. But yeah, we take pride in how we are positioned in the community. We really love all the support we get from locals, and just the farm being here and trying to be stewards of the land and keep the views open and the land beautiful instead of a bunch of houses. So that's our goal.
So then moving on to Kettleborough, what prompted you to start a cider company?
So I went to Cornell for business management, was my major up there, but I got really interested in the Finger Lakes wine industry, and both as a consumer, but also from an agricultural standpoint. So I was probably going to wineries before, the government would have liked me to. But what really got me into it was when I started taking some of the horticultural classes, seeing how grapes grow, seeing how fermentation works and how wine works. And I started working at a winery while I was up there, and kind of decided that when I came home, I wanted to plant a vineyard and start a winery. And I talked to my parents about it. They were supportive, and this was 2007, so I'm dating myself now. But hard cider was not popular in 2007. It was still that drink that your weird friend brought to a party and only drank, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there wasn't the industry to start a cidering. So I got home from college, I planted my vineyard, and I started growing grapes. Kind of taught myself, I learned a little bit at school, and I taught myself the rest kind of as I went. The Cornell lab in Highland was a big help. I was using their resources quite a bit to learn how to do things. And in the time it took to plant, raise, and grow a vineyard, hard cider went from being this little niche thing to a very important beverage. So it happened pretty explosively right around 2010, 2011. And I had already been experimenting with cider in my basement, just making batches because I didn't have any grapes yet. I wasn't making wine, but I wanted to play around with something, and I had cider at my disposal. So I was like, let's just try fermenting cider. It's very similar to making white wine. And when hard cider started to get some traction in the national market, I was like, well, I have 2 acres of grapes and I have 300 acres of apples. So kind of a natural little thing. And there was no cider license yet in New York State. So I needed a winery license anyway. So I figured I'll make wine, I'll make cider, it'll be a thing. So since we were already known for the apples, I made it a cider house and figured wine would be kind of a additional thing on top of it, and slowly realized that wine was not where I wanted to go, and hard cider was continuing to pick up traction and gaining a lot of followers on the national market. I was able to get selected to go on a trip to France with another group of local cider makers and do a cultural exchange with some cider makers in France, where they came here. We went there and we learned from each other. It was really fun. And kind of the rest is history. It just grew from there. It's a labor of love, definitely a weekend and evening job while I'm working full time on the farm still, but we've grown every year and are excited to move forward with it.
It's really funny that you say that cider wasn't really popular then. I didn't realize that like you had to grow, or the popularity had to grow for that, like, because hard cider is my favorite drink.
Yeah. No, you are right in the target demographic, so it makes sense. But yeah, no, in like I said, before 2010, it was nothing. There was no cideries around. There was Warwick Valley Cider, or Warwick Valley Winery, obviously in Warwick. They've been making cider since the 90s. They're the oldest local cidery around. It was really just them. And then I think Sam Adams started Angry Orchard in 2012.
I was going to say Angry Orchard.
Yeah. So I am technically a year older than Angry Orchard.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Angry Orchard is a product of Sam Adams, the Boston Beer Company. And they saw the trend starting and put a lot of effort behind it and became the largest cider producer in the world. And all that happened in the early teens. So it was everything that cider is in America now pretty much started in like 2010.
Wow. That's like really recent.
Yeah, I think it still is, but it was the fastest growing beverage in the United States. At one point, it was growing something like 300% a year, which is
wow.
insane. So
wow. Well, it's definitely really popular now. I can see that why you would want to get in on that.
We've watched it happen. It's actually quite amazing. For the first few years, most of what we were doing was educating customers. We had our cidery set up right next to our pick your own operation, and we knew that we didn't have the draw. Our name meant nothing. We were brand new and very small distribution, so no one was coming to the farm for us. So we set up right next to the pick your own, which was already very popular, put up a sign, said free tastings, come on in. And so many people that came in were like, so what is hard cider? What's hard about it? And what is it made like beer? And so for at least the first 3 or 4 years, a majority of what we were doing in the cidery was just telling people what it was we were making. And we've recently seen that completely change. Everyone knows what cider is now. And even the preferences of our customers have changed. We were having a hard time selling anything that wasn't very sweet to begin with. And we've seen, especially in the younger demographics, the 21 to 35-year-olds really start, there you are, really starting to, I just turned 36. I'm out of your range now.
Oh my goodness.
I know, it's terrible. We really started to see the younger crowds shifting more towards a craft cider, if you want to call it that. Something that's on the drier side, has different flavors mixed into it, but isn't that sugary sweet, almost like malt beverage that cider used to be.
So would you say like the education part is what sets you apart from other cideries?
I think most places, especially smaller places like ours, are doing a lot of the same things like that. I think our difference is that we have this apple base to start with. So a lot of cideries were born out of people, I don't want to say jumping on the trend, but I mean, everyone jumps on the trend. Places that weren't orchards to begin with, places that are buying their juice or started doing this because of this. So I'm the 4th generation to be growing apples here on the farm, and I came from apple knowledge, and we already had our cider, we call it sweet cider now, our non-alcoholic cider operation. So I had that base of knowledge, and I had the land, and I started growing cider apples that are varieties that wouldn't be grown to sell to the grocery stores or to sell for fresh eating. So these varieties that are now starting to come back into vogue for craft cider that originate usually in France and England, where they have been doing this tradition for hundreds of years. So I think our biggest advantage is the orchard and the land we have and the collective apple knowledge that I've gained just by having this family that's gone back 100 years in apple growing.
So it's just like having that solid base. Right.
Yeah. You can't have good cider without good apples, and you can't have good apples without the knowledge of how to grow them properly and how to harvest them correctly. And there's a lot that goes into it that I don't have time to go into now, but to get your sugars and your acids right, and to get your blending right, and just to get the yields that you need to off the trees. Obviously there's plenty to all of that. And, I'm happy to have that knowledge and that base behind me, where I'm not buying the juice from somebody that's growing the apples, 100 miles away or whatever, or or God forbid, buying concentrate from some other state or something like that. So I think people being able to come to the farm and see the trees that the fruit that they're drinking came off of is a special thing.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I really, really enjoy being able to like talk to people about this stuff. And I like selling cider. I like pouring cider. I like making cider. But my favorite thing to do is when people come in and ask smart questions that I can then have a conversation with them about. And I really like having that knowledge behind me, where I can sit there and I can answer all of their questions, because I planted the trees, I grew the apples, I picked the apples, I pressed the apples, I fermented. Like, I started from open ground and I made that cider for you, and I can answer every question of every step of the way.
Well, I better come up with some intelligent questions for when I visit next month.
Yeah, do your homework.
Yeah. So what do you hope to see happen in the future with Kettleborough?
So my wife and I run Kettleborough together. I do most of the production work where she's doing most of the tasting room and planning work and things like that. And our immediate goal for the next 5 years is to have a much more established tasting room, retail space, and hopefully event space running where we can do weddings and do parties and host bigger groups that are going to want to come to the farm and have their events on the farm. I think that's our immediate goal. And then after that, expand our wholesale a little bit. We've scaled back our wholesale. We like doing the retail a lot more where we can hand sell things. We're so small with our operation that getting things out to grocery stores and things, it wasn't working for us. So after we solidify ourselves with our products and our event space and the retail, then expanding back out into wholesale. But
yeah, so I got my list.
Yep.
Picking strawberries. I'm gonna, come for the cider ice cream flight. Gotta come back in the fall for that apple cider donut ice cream. Mm-hmm. I got my list now. I'm super excited.
You're set.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. This has been I really enjoyed this interview.
Thank you. Yes, I did too.
Okay, so that's all for today. Thanks for tuning in. This is Samantha Ambrosini signing off.